Hello, everybody. This is the Monday Night Pod, Tyler and Fensky. Tonight, we're going to be talking about witnessing from Psalm 59.
Picking up here in verse 1, it says, "Deliver me from my enemies, O God. Protect me from those who rise up against me. Deliver me from evildoers and save me from bloodthirsty men. See how they lie in wait for me. Fierce men conspire against me for no offense or sin of mine, O Lord. I've done no wrong, yet they are ready to attack me. Arise to help me. Look on my plight."
Yeah, so tonight I started off the teaching just talking about the fact that, the context of the psalm, it says when Saul had sent men to watch David's house in order to kill him. And we've talked a lot about enemies in weeks past in the teachings here Monday nights and on the pod as well. And very few of us has probably had enemies so severe to where, fierce men are conspiring against us, trying to kill us. I made the point that we all do, as believers, have one common enemy, and that's Satan. But when David talks here and he says, I've done no offense or sin, and I've done no wrong, it made me think about the fact that Jesus told us that as believers, we will have people that will hate us just because we identify with Jesus Christ, right? And that comes from John 15, verse 18. Jesus says, "If the world hates you, keep in mind that it hated me first. If you belong to the world, it would love you as its own. As it is, you do not belong to the world, but I have chosen you out of the world. That is why the world hates you. Remember the words I have spoken to you. No servant is greater than his master. If they persecuted me, they will persecute you also. If they obeyed my teaching, they will obey yours as well." And then later in verse 25, he says, "But this is to fulfill what is written in their law. They hated me without reason." Right? And so the main topic we want to talk about tonight is kind of the weight of being a witness for Jesus Christ. And that when you're trying to win people over for Christ or just being an example of Christ, like David shared over here, how important the aspect is of not having offenses or sins that you're carrying around or wrongdoing others.
Yeah, and that was one of the things you highlighted tonight, right? Is David saying, "For no offense or sin of mine," and saying, "I have done no wrong, yet they are ready to attack me."
Yep.
Right, and you looked at that out of Thessalonians, which is talking about just being blameless, right, as a believer, and how that can then set you up in terms of just the respect necessary to be able to witness to somebody.
Yeah, so this comes from 1 Thessalonians 2, starting in verse 3. It says, "For the appeal we make does not spring from error or impure motives, nor are we trying to trick you. On the contrary, we speak as men approved by God to be entrusted with the gospel. We're not trying to please men, but God, who tests our hearts," right? Important aspect of just being a testimony for Christ is to understand that you got to come from a pure place where you're not trying to please men, you're trying to please God. It says we're not looking for praise from men, nor you or anyone else. That they weren't trying to be a burden to people, but verse 7 says, "With you, like a mother caring for her little children. We loved you so much that we were delighted to share with you not only the gospel of God, but our lives as well, because you had become so dear to us. Surely you remember, brothers, our toil and hardship. We worked day and night in order not to be a burden to anyone while we preached the gospel to you." And then it says in verse 10, it says, "You are witnesses, and so is God, of how holy, righteous, and blameless we were among you. For you know that we dealt with each of you as fathers deals with his own children, encouraging, comforting, and urging you to live lives worthy of God who calls you into his kingdom and glory." So that's an important aspect to understand and fully accept, is that as a believer, the weight and the pressure on you to earn your respect in your community and wherever your feet are set is vital to pushing the message and having it being received, the message of Jesus Christ. Because if you're a burden to others, or you're not just doing basic necessities such as working hard or putting your best foot forward, men just aren't going to receive anything that you have to say, right? You have to have some basic foundation of respect, and the easiest way to earn respect is to be the hardest worker in the room, to care the most in the room. I think one way that you can set yourself apart is to show that you really care, right? And Paul talks about this earlier in the verses. like a mother caring for little children, most people don't care. They're in something for themselves or just what they can get out of it. And if you can show yourself to be genuine with others, that goes a long way in just breaking down the walls that they have and earning their trust. And through a good work ethic, you can earn their respect as well.
Yeah, and it is important to note, too, what we're talking about tonight is from Matthew 28:18, which is known as the Great Commission, right? So Jesus came to them and said, "All authority in heaven and on earth has been given to me. Therefore, go and make disciples of all nations, baptizing them in the name of the Father and of the Son and of the Holy Spirit, and teaching them to obey everything I have commanded you. And surely I am with you always to the very end of the age." And that is one of the signs of the end of the age, is that this gospel will be preached in the whole world as a testimony to all nations, and then the end will come. That's Matthew 24:14. So that's one of the mandates you have as a believer, is sharing the gospel of Jesus Christ, right? And what Tyler's really getting into is just some of the ways you can be effective with that and what's going to allow that to have impact. And he mentioned, you were just talking about, the aspect of Paul referencing that, they were not a burden to anyone, but the aspect of hard work. He talks about that again in 2 Thessalonians, where he says, in the name of the Lord Jesus Christ, we command you, brothers, to keep away from every brother who is idle and does not live according to the teaching you received from us. For you yourselves know how you ought to follow our example. We were not idle when we were with you, nor do we eat anyone's food without paying for it. On the contrary, we worked night and day, laboring and toiling so that we would not be a burden to any of you. We did this not because we do not have the right to such help. Okay, so if you are in ministry, there is a dynamic of, being supported by a congregation or other people funding the ministry. So that is an acceptable thing. He says, but in order to make ourselves a model for you to follow, for even when we were with you, we gave you this rule: if a man will not work, he shall not eat. So there is a model there that that Paul references of what they did in Thessalonica was, yes, they were not a burden to anybody while they preached the gospel of God to you. Rather, they were working, they themselves, to support their own ministry that they were doing. And like you said, that can be kind of just a pillar of respect in terms of sharing the gospel, is that you are setting forth that model of hard work, right? And not being a burden to anybody, right? The church certainly, to kind of zoom out here, the church does get a lot of heat, and in many cases rightfully so, for when it's perceived that ministers are in it for the money, right? Or that's the reason why they're in the ministry, or one of the motivators for their ministry is not the gospel of Jesus Christ and sharing it and being a witness and advancing the kingdom, but rather to make money off of it.
Yeah.
So that is something to be certainly aware of on the other side of the coin, to make sure that it's not something that's what is being, people are perceiving it as, or that's what's actually can be occurring. That's one of the verses you mentioned tonight, was just it was not, we never use flattery, nor do we put on a mask to cover up greed. Mm-hmm. God is our witness.
Yeah. Right.
We were not looking for praise of man, for not from you or anyone else. Right. So just noting that this was not, anything having to do with greed, their ministry, and then they back that up by working themselves to fund their own ministry. Powerful message.
Yeah. Paul notes that his intentions are pure, right? I don't want anything from you, and I don't need anything from you. And when you can come to a person from that place, the pure intentions that just prove to be more effective, because they know it's genuine, right? Another aspect that we talked about was from 1 Corinthians 9, and really just talked about going the extra mile to relate to people and meet them where they are and do whatever it takes to try to win them over. This is Paul talking in 1 Corinthians 9:19. He says, though I am free and belong to no man, I make myself a slave to everyone to win as many as possible. To the Jews I became like a Jew to win the Jews. To those under the law I became like one under the law, so as to win those under the law. In verse 21 it says, to those not having the law I became like one not having the law. Verse 22 it says, to the weak I became weak to win the weak. I become all things to all men, so that by all possible means I might save some. I do all this for the sake of the gospel, that I might share in its blessings. One point I made tonight is just effective communication and building rapport with people. 2 C's, it's called compliment someone and then find commonality with someone. And when I was reading the verses, I was reminded of that. You're not, being a chameleon necessarily or being fake. He says to the Jews became like a Jew, and to those under the law I became like under the law. To the weak I became weak. I think it's just the humility to meet people where they're at, right? And just build a genuine relationship with them. Jesus Christ says that the harvest harvest is plentiful, but the workers are few, right? So if you would just open your eyes and look around, there's plenty of opportunities that the Lord has put in front of you, and that was for a reason. Right, nothing's just happenstance when it comes to the gospel or comes to the Lord's will or your life once you accept Jesus. And if you would just open your eyes and go beyond your own norms, Paul's saying, I'm becoming all things to all men, right? And I'm doing whatever it takes by all means possible, right? So do whatever it takes to win others, right? Relate to them however you can, right? And win them however you can. And don't do that for yourself, for your own edification. Do it for the sake of the gospel and realize that, that's where the real blessing is. We'll talk about this in a minute, but at the end of the day, that's what matters in eternity.
Yeah, and he talks about that in 1 Corinthians 2 as well, where he says, when I came to you, brothers, I did not come with eloquence or superior wisdom, as I proclaimed to you the testimony about God. For I resolved to know nothing while I was with you, except Jesus Christ and him crucified. I came to you in weakness and fear and with much trembling. My message and my preaching were not with wise and persuasive words, but with a demonstration of the Spirit's power, so that your faith might not rest on men's wisdom, but on God's power. All right, that's an important message in today's day and age, because you talk about just the juvenilization of church.
Yeah.
Where it's become such a often watered down message in the American church. And we're missing the punch of it because we're not just preaching Christ crucified. And it's a lot of, sometimes it's hard to distinguish, where just the meat of the message is in the message of the preaching and the message of the teaching, to distinguish it between that and just a, personal development seminar.
Yeah.
Right? So that's, the faith has to rest not on men's wisdom, but on God's power. And 1 Corinthians 2, really just those verses there, that 1 through 5, really just giving you a great way of saying that, when you are witnessing to people, how you should be going about it, right? Just preaching Christ crucified. I came in weakness and fear, with much trembling, right? Not with wise and persuasive words, but with a demonstration of the Spirit's power.
Yeah.
Right? It's not, witnessing to people is not about, you're arguing about some, minutia point or some kind of just like gray area point about the faith, but the message of Christ crucified. Mm-hmm. Right?
Yeah. And I like what you say, the demonstration of the Spirit, because if you think it's all on you, and it's all on you to act right, and it's all on you to make the right argument, it just becomes a whole weight of pressure upon your shoulders, right? We're nothing without the Spirit of God, and we're nothing without the power of God moving behind us, right? And so when Paul talks about, being holy, blameless, and righteous, from those verses in 1 Thessalonians, that's not an easy standard to live up to on your own. Right, you need Jesus Christ, and you need the power of Jesus Christ, the transferring and renewing the building power of Jesus Christ by your side to do that. And I think one of the things that overwhelms people, that has overwhelmed me, that overwhelms the church in general, is the realization that and you talked about idle hands, not just idle hands with work, but kind of just an idle spirit, a lukewarm spirit to where they're not realizing that every single day is a battle, right? Every single day you're waking up into a war, right? With powers and principalities, to where you need to be in the Word, you need to be around other believers, you need to be ready to fight, right? And you need to be ready to work your field, right? I think a lot of people don't either accept that or wake up ready for that, or even consider what their field is, right? And where we concluded tonight was 1 Corinthians 9, verse 24. It said, "Do you not know that in a race all runners run, but only one gets the prize? Run in such a way as to get the prize. Everyone who competes in the games goes into strict training. They do it to get a crown that will not last, but we do it to get a crown that will last forever. Therefore, I do not run like a man running aimlessly," right? That's what I was referring to. So many people kind of wake up aimlessly and suffer for it. "I do not fight like a man beating in the air. No, I beat my body and make it my slave, so that after I preach to others, I myself will not be disqualified for the prize." So if you're listening to this and you are a believer, I would just encourage you to kind of self-reflect and ask yourself, who is in my life, and what field has the Lord given me in this season, right? Where am I susceptible to fall, to where, I'm not being the standard, or I'm not being the example that I ought to be to others, right? And what kind of help am I getting for that susceptibility? Am I training, like Paul talks about here, training as to run and get the prize? Am I in the Word daily? Do I have prayer time daily? Am I around other believers frequently enough? And then understanding that, all the ways that I can separate myself. I can separate myself in my work ethic. I can separate myself in my speech, right? Am I talking like a non-believer? Am I gossiping about others like a non-believer? Am I speaking truth to people? How do I handle adversity? I've noticed that one of the big ways for you to witness to people is that when they face adversity, realizing that you're someone they could come to for wisdom and counsel, and to be a shoulder to lean on, right? And from there, you can give them truth and give them the gospel of Jesus Christ. How do you handle adversity? How do you handle a bad coach, a bad boss, a bad client? How do you handle life, right? And understanding that there's opportunity in all those things. And if you avoid running that race aimlessly, and you train diligently, and you wake up ready as one going after to get the prize, understanding that this work in this gospel of Jesus Christ and the kingdom, the impacts of it are forever. If you wake up with that intentionality, all of a sudden, and it's all focused on the gospel of Jesus Christ, from there, you'll see yourself start to have a lot more positive impact and experience a lot less pressure trying to live up to something that you can't live up to without the Lord.
So that's the Monday Night Pod. Tyler and Fensky, we'll see you guys next week.